Today we're doing a Civ 6 Pantheon tier list for Gathering Storm. The June update just shook things up, so let's see where everything landed. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with the channel. Alright, so this is meant to be a guide to help both new and intermediate level players kind of wrap their heads around all the different changes to the Pantheon system that came to us with this recent June update to Civ 6. Now, the way we're going to be doing this is I'm basically going to go from the top of the list to the bottom of the list here, talking about the different Pantheons, what they do, what they can be used for, and then at the end, after we've gone through everything, I'm basically going to give them a tier list. The way our tier list is going to work this time is we're going to do tier A, which would be really great Pantheons that have a huge impact and are very useful. Tier B Pantheons, which are all around pretty well-rounded Pantheons, which are good for you, but not really the best that are available now. And then finally, we're going to have our tier S Pantheons, which stands for shit. It pretty much explains itself that this tier list is going to be filled with the rest of the Pantheons that are basically garbage, and you're only going to take them if you get a really late Pantheon, and there's nothing else that you can get your hands on. Okay, so with that being said, let's just get straight into this here. The first one on the list is the Dance of the Aurora Pantheon. Now, holy site districts get +1 faith from adjacent tundra tiles. Now, this is actually a pretty decent Pantheon. The big disadvantage to it is that obviously it's very situational. You need to be surrounded by tundra tiles in the majority of cities to actually get something from this, as well as be basically going for some sort of faith gain, because you're only getting the adjacency bonus from holy sites. So unless you happen to be going for an early religion, or you end up conquering a nation that has a lot of holy sites and a lot of tundra, it's not really going to do much for you. So it's obviously very situational when you're going to pick this. With that being said, if you are in the right situation, it's freaking really powerful, as you can just create some monster holy sites adjacencies, which can help propel you forward in a religious game, or even just a game where you're going to take that faith and turn it into production somehow, whether it be going for the Grandmaster's Chapel in your Governor Plaza tier 2 building, or getting a Monumentality Golden Age, whatever floats your boat. So the second one on the list is Desert Folklore. It's basically the exact same as Dance of the Aurora, except for obviously this concerns desert tiles and not tundra. So I'm not really going to dive too deep into this, other than saying that desert tiles are obviously, as you can see here, we have the yields turned on. They're quite a bit shittier than tundra tiles, although not by much. So I would say that Dance of the Aurora is probably a little bit better, but realistically, you're only going to be choosing the desert or Dance of the Aurora in the correct situations anyway. Next on our list is Sacred Path. Holy sites get +1 faith from adjacent rainforest tiles. Again, this is a very situational Pantheon, but just like Desert Folklore and Dance of the Aurora, in the right situation, it can be very powerful. Especially now that with this new patch, we have the changes to the lumber mills. Being allowed to build them on rainforest completely changes the game, in the fact that now we're not necessarily just going to be chopping every single rainforest we come across. So with that being said, it's definitely going to make things a little bit more interesting, and in my personal opinion, bumps up Sacred Path, and it at least makes it an actual feasible choice for you to go as far as Pantheons. Continuing on, we have River Goddess. +2 amenities and +2 housing to cities if they have a holy site district adjacent to a river. Again, very situational. You have to be in the right spot in order to get any use out of this Pantheon, which definitely makes it a little bit less powerful, but in the right situation, it's going to give you a huge boost. So this Pantheon can get very powerful, especially if you're playing with a civilization like the Khmer, for instance, who already have huge adjacency bonuses for placing holy sites next to rivers. Continuing on here, we have Monument to the Gods, +15% production towards ancient and classical era wonders. Personally, I don't feel that this is a very good Pantheon at all. I mean, it is nice, sure, if you just happen to have a wonder that you're specifically targeting that you think is important to your game. Whether it's something like the pyramids, or especially say Petra, that you really have a great Petra site and you want to get it built, the extra 15% production can definitely help towards that, but realistically, it's not that big of a deal. Next on the list here, we have Divine Spark. +1 great person points from holy sites, campuses with a library, and theater squares with an amphitheater. Now, this is a very, very powerful Pantheon. In fact, it's probably one of the best in the game now that they've gotten rid of the Goddess of the Harvest. The little tweak they did make to it, you need to have either a library or an amphitheater in your campus or theater squares respectively. I mean, realistically, if you're going for a science or a culture victory, you're going to be getting these buildings anyway, so it's not that big of a deal. It just kind of delays the great people points until you get those buildings in, but still, it's pretty much always useful, and when you're going for a victory type of one of those games, it's going to be great. Another really good thing about this is with the other changes they've made to where it's going to take your great people points and turn it into faith if there's none available left in the game. For instance, all the religions are gone, you can't get a great prophet anymore. Well, now it's going to take your great person points for the prophet and turn it into faith. That really adds a convenient way for you to produce faith now, which is definitely going to have a huge impact on religious games going forward. Lady of the Reeds and Marshes, +1 production from marsh, oasis, and desert floodplains. This is a very, very situational Pantheon. Now, personally, I don't think it's that powerful, but in the right spot, it could definitely be useful. The types of games that you're going to be playing in that situation are very few and far between, so realistically, I don't think it's that great of a Pantheon at all. God of the Sea, +1 production from fishing boats. Now, this is a fairly mediocre choice in my opinion. In the right situation, it can be great, as adding that extra production can really help you in the early game, but it's very situational. There's not very many times when you're playing a naval game and you're going to be completely surrounded by water tiles where this is going to have a big impact on your game, but it's great that it is there for when you are playing those types of games, and +1 production from every fishing boat adds up really quickly. Moving along, we have God of the Open Sky, +1 culture from pastures. I think this is actually a very useful Pantheon. Pastures are pretty common with the new map scripting in 6 Gathering Storm, and having that boost to culture, especially in the very early game, as soon as you can get these Pantheons unlocked, is very crucial to help propel you into your next form of government, which is great, as well as giving you a helpful boost to unlocking governor titles, which can definitely have a big impact on your game. So in the right situation, this is a very good Pantheon. Goddess of the Hunt is next up, +1 food and +1 production from camps. This has been tweaked a little bit, and I think in the right situation, it can be very powerful for you, especially if you're starting in an area of the map where there's a lot of tundra or snow tiles, as camps are very, very common in those types of tile sets. Now, this Pantheon used to just be +1 food, so getting that extra bonus of +1 production is definitely a big step in the right direction. It's definitely not game-breakingly powerful, but it is definitely handy in the right situation, especially if you're not planning to have faith be a big part of your game. Continuing along, we have Stone Circles, +2 faith from quarries. Continuing along, we have Stone Circles, +2 faith from quarries. Now, in my opinion, this is a Pantheon that is so situational that it's really not that helpful at all, considering unless you're playing with the abundant resources feature on, you're not likely to come across a map where you're going to be just completely covered with stone all over the place. So with all that being said, in my opinion, this definitely isn't the best of Pantheons. Next up is Religious Idols, +2 faith from mines over luxury and bonus resources. Again, this is so situational that it is definitely towards the bottom end as far as Pantheon strength goes. I mean, 99 times out of 100, your empire is not going to be covered with luxury and bonus resources, so this faith isn't going to go very far. It's not going to add up very quickly, and with all that being said, that's why I don't consider it a very good Pantheon at all. Moving along, we have God of Craftsman, +1 production and +1 faith from improved strategic resources. Now, this is a fairly good Pantheon in my opinion. I mean, it's not game breaking by any means, but Strategic resources are quite common, and it's every single strategic resource, whether it's horses, iron, coal, you name it, they all get +1 production and +1 faith. So this, I feel, is a very useful Pantheon that you're gonna most likely get a lot of use out of, especially as the game progresses. Even though, you know, the bigger you get, the farther along in the game you go, that +1 production isn't really that big of a boost. If, you know, you luck out and you have quite a few horses and iron throughout your empire early, this is definitely going to be a big boost in the early game. And while its impact does go down the longer you play the game, it is still free production after all. So, I mean, what's wrong with that? Especially the faith is just kind of like a nice little bonus on top there. It's not really gonna make as big of a difference for you most likely as the production, but I mean, hey, free faith is free faith, right? Now, the Goddess of Festivals, +1 culture from plantations. This is, again, another solid choice for a Pantheon. They finally shifted away from having the two different choices, whether you get food from half the plantation sources or culture from the other half, and have just shifted it to plantations in general, giving you +1 culture. I think this is long overdue. It always used to piss me off so much when I'd have to, like, literally jump to the Pantheon screen, read all of the different resources that are going to give me culture, and then jump back into the game and look throughout my map to try and add them all up, because I could, for the life of me, I could never remember which ones gave food and which ones gave culture. And in my personal opinion, the food was like, who gives a shit? You're not really going to use it very often. So now that they've completely just gone away from that and made plantations in general give +1 culture, I think this Pantheon is a lot stronger. Hell, it's a lot more convenient. It's a great quality of life improvement from what it used to be. And again, as I had already mentioned when we were talking about the Pantheon that gives you the extra culture from pastures, culture is very, very powerful earlier in the game to get you going as quickly as you can into your next tier of governments, which helps you out quite a bit, as well as also unlocking very useful government titles, which can help you ramp your game up as quickly as you can. So next on our list is God of the Forge, +25% production towards ancient and classical military units. This is a great Pantheon. I mean, if you have any intentions of playing a domination game whatsoever, or even of just conquering a neighbor or two early on in the game before switching into science or culture or diplomatic or whatever victory type you're going for, this Pantheon can definitely help you out. That 25% production adds up very quickly and can give you that boost you need to start conquering your neighbors as quickly as you can. Not to mention, if you're playing with a civilization that has powerful early game units, or just great domination bonuses like Nubia with their archers early in the game, or Genghis Khan, etc., this 25% production is already good. But in situations like that, when you're playing with a civilization that has those powerful early game units or powerful domination bonuses, it just makes it that much more important that you take God of the Forge in those situations. Next up is Initiation Rites, +50 faith for each barbarian outpost cleared. The unit that cleared the barbarian outpost heals +100 health points. Now, personally, right now, I'm kind of undecided about this Pantheon. It has its merits where, you know, you can stack that faith quickly here. There's no mention. I'm pretty sure there used to be a condition where you had to have like a holy site or something within a certain amount of tiles in order for this to work. But it looks like they've changed it now to just +50 faith in general for clearing a barbarian outpost, which, I mean, it can add up quickly, especially considering it seems like they've increased the barbarian presence in the early game in this latest patch, unless I'm just imagining things anyway. But having that little extra bonus too, the unit that cleared the camp heals to 100 health points, helps you keep moving along and clearing outposts as quickly as you can. Now, if you manage to get, say, trigger a golden age in the classical or medieval eras, if you have chosen this Pantheon, that 50 faith can multiply fairly quickly and be used to get things like extra builders and settlers quicker to help give you a boost that way. But ultimately, it's not really overpowerful, and it all depends on barbarian camps spawning, and it also depends on you actually clearing those barbarian camps, which, as we know, can be a bit of a challenge sometimes without having city-states or enemy AIs snipe them on you. Finishing up, again, very situational, but I mean, it could be used. So I'm kind of on the fence with this one at the moment, and I'm definitely going to need to play around with it a bit in a few games before I form more of a solid opinion. God of the Healing increases healing by plus 30 in your Holy Site district or any adjacent tiles. Personally, I feel this is a very, very weak Pantheon. It is so situational that realistically, without mincing words, I consider this one of the shittiest Pantheons in the game. I mean, the only situation that I could see it being effective at all would be if you're going for a religious game, which, you know, sets you back a little bit so you don't have a ton of units out and you're being attacked by an enemy AI. Only in that specific situation would I say this would have any use whatsoever. And so for me, at least personally, I really don't think this is a Pantheon worth picking, because it is so situational and very unlikely that you're going to get any use of it whatsoever. Next up is God of War. Bonus faith equal to 50% of the strength of each combat unit killed within 8 tiles of a Holy Site district. Now, similar to God of Healing that we just talked about, this is another one that is very situational, but I think it's a step in the right direction compared to God of Healing. It's most likely going to be a lot more useful because it is a little bit less situational. I mean, you could go ahead and create a custom game if you wanted, I guess, where you pick like all religious type civilizations and then kind of start a crusade or a holy war, which you might get the most use of this. But again, even though it is slightly better than God of Healing and a step in the right direction, in my opinion, it's still a pretty crappy Pantheon overall. Continuing along, we have fertility rites. When chosen, receive a builder in your capital. City growth rate is 10% higher. Now, they definitely buffed this Pantheon by adding the free builder into it, and it is now an actually feasible choice as a Pantheon, whereas before it was definitely one that you wanted to avoid unless there was pretty much nothing else available. So I think they've gone and taken it from our shit tier list and moved it up into the B class. But realistically speaking, a builder usually isn't going to make or break your game. I mean, it's just a nice little cherry on top with the city growth 10% higher. But most situations, it's not that important in Civilization 6 to get your population growing by a measly 10%, as you're trying to go wide and not tall, and it just makes more sense to get more cities out and worry about that rather than have only 10% growth. Religious settlements is next on our list. When chosen, receive a settler in your capital. Border expansion rate is 15% faster. Now, this is probably, in my opinion, the Pantheon that they have significantly improved the most. It went from a completely garbage Pantheon in all previous iterations of Civilization 6 and now being one that is probably going to be picked fairly often. I mean, you're choosing your Pantheon so early in the game that getting settlers and new cities is crucial, and having a free settler is just a great boost. I mean, the border expansion rate of 15% faster. I mean, sure, that might save you from buying some tiles in the long run, but realistically, if you're picking this Pantheon, you're basically picking it for the free settler. Now, considering this is going to increase the price of your settlers, keep that in mind if you're choosing this Pantheon, that you might want to try and sell off resources so that you can buy a settler before you actually choose this Pantheon. But considering you generally get your Pantheons anywhere between like turn 10 to turn 30 in the game, it's going to be kind of hard unless you get a great start to raise enough money to buy a settler before choosing this. So again, in my opinion now, a very strong choice to pick. Just keep in mind that it's going to alter the amount of money you need to spend in order to purchase a settler. Slowly but surely, we're making our way to the bottom of the list here. We got 3 more left. So next up is City Patron Goddess, plus 25% production towards districts in cities without a specialty district. So in my opinion, this is not a very powerful Pantheon at all. I mean, plus 25% production, sure, it's nice, but it's only in the city's first district, which is always going to be their cheapest anyway. And realistically, I think there's just so many different better choices now with all these improvements to the Pantheons that this is definitely gone from being a mediocre at best Pantheon. I think, in my opinion anyways, it's dropped towards the bottom of the barrel. So next up we have Earth Goddess, +2 faith from tiles with breathtaking appeal. In the past, because you only needed charming appeal or better, you could get this online early and really ramp up your faith. It's really not that hard to find tiles with charming appeal or better, as long as you're fairly careful about chopping out forests or building mines, etc. But now they've doubled the faith you get from these tiles, but they have to be breathtaking, and they've also doubled the amount of appeal required to get the bonus. So it's definitely still a very viable Pantheon to choose, especially when you are going for those culture games, but you're going to have to put a little work in beforehand to help bring up the appeal throughout your empire before you start reaping the rewards of Earth Goddess. Alright, and last but not least, we have Fire Goddess, a brand new Pantheon here that gives +2 faith from geothermal fissures and volcanic soil. I think all around this is definitely an interesting Pantheon choice that they've created. I always play with my disaster intensity set to 3, so I mean it's fairly normal for volcanoes to be very common and to also be erupting all the time. So in the right situations you can definitely get quite a bit of faith from this, especially considering that you don't have to actually do anything to get this faith. You don't have to build pastures or build plantations. You just automatically get it as long as you have the geothermal fissures in your empire or volcanoes spewing out and improving the soil around them. So that's definitely a nice bonus towards this as well. But I mean, with that being said, how often are you settling every single city, or at least almost every single city, next to volcanoes or geothermal fissures? So again, it's fairly situational, but it can definitely ramp up very quickly if you do happen to get a map where you have some great city locations that happen to be next to volcanoes. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with the channel. Alright, so now for the moment everybody's been waiting for, our actual tier list of the Pantheons. To break this down, we're going to have our tier A Pantheons, where they're all very convenient. They're super adaptable and flexible as to what situations that they're going to be useful in. Plus, they have very common situations that can be useful no matter what type of victory you're going for. They can still be taken no matter what you're choosing to do with your game, and give you such a significant boost that it's going to be very helpful to you no matter what you're doing. Our next is the tier B, where these Pantheons are very useful, but they're powerful in the right circumstances. But the situational conditions that are applied to them take them down from that tier A really super powerful and flexible, and bump them down just to the next level, followed by finally our tier S, which is the tier shit. And it stands for itself that these Pantheons are either not powerful or that they're so situationally restricted that they're basically useless unless you just happen to get the god roll of a game for them, or specifically actually create a game with very specific modifications in order to try and trigger them and make them useful to you. So with all that out of the way, in tier A we're going to find Divine Spark, God of the Forge, and Religious Settlements. Dropping down to the next level in tier B, we have Dance of the Aurora, Desert Folklore, Sacred Path, River Goddess, God of the Open Sky, Goddess of the Hunt, God of Craftsmen, Goddess of Festivals, Fertility Rites, and Earth Goddess. And last but not least is our tier S for shit. And in this bracket we have Monument to the Gods, Lady of the Reeds and Marshes, Stone Circles, Religious Idols, Initiation Rites, God of Healing, God of War, City Patron Goddess, and Fire Goddess. Now, two of the Pantheons that I have listed in this shit bracket, Fire Goddess and Initiation Rites, I'm on the fence with both of those, and I need to play around with them a bit more and have them in a few games before I can really say those are the only two that I'm really hesitant putting down in this really bottom bracket, and I think they actually might have a place in the tier B ranking. But again, I need to actually play with them before I could go ahead and say that. If you're new here, subscribe and hit the bell to keep up with the channel. So there you go. That's my personal take on the new Pantheon structuring and how I would rank them. But I'd love to hear from you. What do you think? Do you think I'm an idiot? Do you agree with me? What are some of your favorite Pantheons in the game now? Or what are some of the changes that you're most excited about? Are you happy that Goddess of the Harvest is gone? Are you pissed off about it? Let me know in the comments below. I'd love to hear from you. But with that being said, that's pretty much it. I just want to say, if you've enjoyed this video or it's helped you at all, please do me a solid and leave a like on the video. It goes a long way to helping a small channel like me get discovered, so I'd appreciate it. But with that being said, thanks again, and I'll see you in the next video.